Here with us now, Bloomberg correspondent Willem Marx, who's the co-author of Baluchistan at a Crossroads. At a Crossroads?
At a crossroads, yeah.
I mean, 99% of the people watching this program, 99% of the people, I think, in the United States, couldn't tell you where Baluchistan is. Where is it?
It is a region inside Pakistan. It's a province of Pakistan on the border with Iran and Afghanistan. It's by far the largest province in Pakistan, but it's very thinly populated. You don't really hear much about it. But in terms of scale, just to give you an idea, it's the size of Montana and Wyoming combined. So it's a huge landmass.
And it's, looking at just the pictures in the book, Baluchistan at Crossroads, you talk about remote. This is like the backside of the moon, some of these shots that you've taken.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult landscape. It's largely mountainous and desert, and at the moment it's sort of home to an insurgency against the Pakistani central government. It's been going on for about 7 years now, and we've got some of the pictures here, I think, from the book. These are people who are living in an incredibly difficult situation. They're treated as second-class citizens by Pakistan's government. And so over the last 7 or 8 years, they've picked up arms against the state. And it's not a war we hear much about. As you mentioned, it's very remote, so it's really difficult for journalists to get there. People like myself who've spent time there have subsequently been blacklisted.
What are we looking at here, this particular shot?
We've got a man here who's fighting on behalf of a movement called the Baluch Liberation Army. He and his wife and kid live in a very remote region of the province, and he's one of hundreds, maybe thousands of fighters who've taken up very, very old weaponry against the Pakistani army, one of the largest standing armies in the world.
Excuse me, the world as we know it is awash in weapons and conflict. Where did the weapons come from, if they have newly acquired weapons? I don't know that they do.
A lot of them, the ones I've spoken to, tell me they buy from Afghan intermediaries. There's huge numbers of weapons, as we all know, washing around Afghanistan, dating back to the late 1970s and the conflict with the Soviet Union. And there are lots of Afghan arms dealers on this border region with Pakistan. It's very easy to go and buy an AK-47, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and bring them back into your region inside Pakistan to fight against the government.
Willem, my understanding was that you can't actually get into Baluchistan very easily, that the security forces have such a tight grip on the region because of its strategic sensitivities. What was it like for you trying to travel through there? How much access did you have to people?
It's difficult. I mean, I think one of my visas took me 3 months to get in the end, and it's a question of going back and forth with the Pakistani authorities to get access. It's almost now completely on lockdown to foreign journalists, and this is one of the things that the Pakistani government is doing, the military in particular, to cover up the fact that they are kidnapping activists. We've got photos, I think, from the book of people who've vanished. They get taken away by security forces, these activists, and they're tortured, they're often executed, their bodies are left at the side of the road. And because journalists from the West aren't able to get in there and talk about this, this is something the military is able to completely cover up.
This is one of them.
Yeah, this is a man I interviewed while I was there a few years ago. He had been taken from the side of the road by the Pakistani military, by their intelligence agencies, the ISI we hear so much about. And he told me at one time he was hanging from his ankles for hours at a time, being beaten with metal rods. And he came out, and when I met him, he was a very psychologically damaged man. But in consequence of his treatment, having just been a political activist before he was tortured, he turned into an active militant leader afterwards. So it was a very good example of, you know, what that kind of treatment can do to a person.
Willem, as you have learned from putting together this book, the consequences of it, certainly being banned from getting into Pakistan, also not being able to try to sell this book inside those borders. But where are the international voices that are looking out for people that you're trying to showcase here when human rights abuses are taking place so rampantly?
Well, I mean, there are organizations like Human Rights Watch, like Amnesty International, who have been releasing reports on this kill and dump policy, they call it, where these activists are kidnapped and then killed, left at the side of the road. But their access itself is being restricted, so it's very difficult for them to verify some of the reports coming out of the region.
What is the root cause of the conflict?
It's complicated, and unfortunately it dates back to the British time in some ways. The Brits carved up the continent, and the Baluch were kind of split between Iran and Pakistan, and some of them left in Afghanistan. And after partition, when India and Pakistan split, the Pakistanis occupied this region militarily. The Baluch had been promised their own homeland. They weren't given one, so in that sense they're analogous to the Kurds. And unfortunately, they feel like second-class citizens, so they've taken up arms and are trying to defend themselves. And in theory, many of them are calling for a separate, independent Baluchistan.
A world apart and a world on fire. Baluchistan at a crossroads. That's the book. Willem Marx is the author, and the photography in here is tremendous. Thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it. The courtroom drama of Oscar Pistorius' testimony may be done, but the trial is far from over. Is the Blade Runner telling the truth? You're watching Morning Joe. We're going to be right back.